Hey guys, quick creepy fact. Only 20% of you watching are subscribed. It's totally free and helps me write more scary stories like this one. Thank you for the support. Now let's dive right in. When I was little, the town I grew up in seemed normal. The summers were hot and dry. The winters were cold enough that you could see your breath. Every Sunday we went to church. No one asked if you wanted to go. It was just something you did, like brushing your teeth or doing your homework. As a kid, I did not think about it. Church was boring, but harmless. I sat in pews that were too big for me and listened to hymns that made me sleepy. That was it. Nothing scary or strange happened. When I left for college, I did not plan on coming back. It was not because I hated my town. Life outside of it just felt bigger and louder. While I was gone, things changed. My mom and dad got divorced during my second year. Dad moved to another town. Mom stayed here. I did not ask many questions about it. Maybe I did not want to know. Now I was back. My mom was sick. There was no one else to take care of her. I did not have brothers or sisters who could help. It was just me. I packed up my things, left the city, and drove back to the town where everybody still knew my name. As I pulled into town, the first thing I saw was the church. It looked the same. The steeple was still crooked. It stuck out against the sky like something sharp. Mom was waiting for me on the porch when I parked the car. She looked smaller than I remembered. She wore a thick sweater even though it was not very cold. When she hugged me, I could feel how thin and frail she had become. "Thank you for coming back, honey," she said. Her voice shook a little when she spoke. We had dinner together that night. We sat at the same kitchen table we had always used. The food was simple: mashed potatoes, baked chicken, and green beans. I kept looking at Mom when she was not paying attention. I noticed how tired her eyes looked. I noticed how slow her hands moved. Mom asked me about my apartment and my job. She talked about small things, trying to keep everything light and normal. I answered her, but my heart was not really in it. Then, while we were talking about the neighbor's new cat, she said it. "You'll need to come to church with me tomorrow." She said it like she was talking about going to the grocery store. I let out a sigh before I could stop myself. I knew she would ask me. I had known it the moment I decided to come back. "I can drive you," I said. "But I do not think I will stay for the service." Mom smiled too brightly, like she was pretending everything was fine. "Oh, don't be silly," she said. "I don't want to sit there alone." For a moment, something strange passed through her eyes. It was quick, but I saw it. It made the air between us feel heavy. It made me feel like something was wrong, but I could not explain it. The next morning, I got up early because Mom wanted to leave for church on time. We ate a quick breakfast. I had toast and coffee. Mom barely touched her food. She seemed nervous, but she smiled at me like everything was fine. The town looked even smaller in the daylight. The stores and houses looked older and more worn down than I remembered. Some places were boarded up, some places looked empty. It felt like the town had been shrinking while I was gone. When we pulled into the church parking lot, I recognized a few faces. There was Mrs. Delaney, who used to be my 5th grade teacher. Mr. Carter, who ran the grocery store, was there too. I saw a few other people I barely remembered from birthday parties or soccer games. Everyone was standing outside the church, talking quietly. At first, it looked like a normal Sunday morning, but the way people stood was strange. Their shoulders were stiff and their smiles seemed forced. I felt a shiver run down my back, but I told myself it was nothing. Mom got out of the car right away and walked toward the church. I followed her, feeling the eyes of the crowd on me as I moved. At the door, a man stood waiting. He was tall and thin. He wore a black suit. His smile was wide, but it did not reach his eyes. When he looked at me, it felt like he was checking something off a list. He reached into a basket beside him and pulled out a bundle of dark red fabric. It was a cloak. He handed the cloak to my mother. She took it and put it on without saying anything. It was like she had done it 100 times before. Then he turned to me. Still smiling, he shoved a cloak into my arms. I shook my head quickly. "No, thanks," I said. "I'm good." The priest's smile did not move. He pushed the cloak into my hands anyway. "There are some things you have to follow," he said. His voice was lower now, almost like a growl. His hand stayed on mine for a few seconds longer than it should have before he pulled away. I stood there, holding the heavy fabric. My heart was pounding in my chest. I did not remember wearing cloaks when I went to this church as a kid. I did not remember anything like this. Before I could say anything, Mom tugged at my sleeve. "Come on, Chelsea," she whispered. Her voice was tight and urgent. "Don't make a scene." I gave in. I threw the cloak over my shoulders. The fabric was heavy and smelled like smoke and something old. It made me feel like I was putting on something that did not belong to me. We walked down the aisle together and sat in a pew near the middle. I tried not to fidget. The cloak itched at my neck. The church was darker than I remembered. The stained glass windows barely let any light through. The only light came from candles along the walls and near the altar. Their flames flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the stone floor. When I looked around, I saw that everyone else was wearing the same red cloaks. They all sat still with pale, serious faces. No one smiled. No one talked. A low whisper moved through the room, like cloth brushing against stone. Then the priest slammed the big double doors shut with a loud boom. The sound made the floor tremble under my feet. He walked slowly down the center aisle. As he passed, every single person stood up and bowed their heads toward him. Everyone except me. I stayed sitting. My arms were crossed. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. When the priest reached our pew, he glanced at me. For a moment, his smile dropped. He gave me a look that was sharp and angry, but then he moved on. The others sat back down at the same time, like someone had pulled invisible strings. I pulled the cloak tighter around me and tried to calm down. The priest climbed up to the pulpit. He carried a large, old book in his hands. He opened it slowly, and the pages creaked in the quiet. Then he started speaking. Not in English. He spoke in slow, deep Latin words. The people around me repeated every word. Their voices were low and strange, filling the church with a heavy, pulsing sound. Even my mother, sitting next to me, spoke along with him, her eyes closed. I stayed silent. Cold sweat gathered at the back of my neck. After the chanting, the priest turned to another page and kept reading. The new words were not the happy Bible verses I remembered from my childhood. They talked about unity through sacrifice. They talked about giving up yourself to become one body, one mind. They talked about offering up the wayward to cleanse the fold. Each sentence made me feel worse. It was like a rope tightening around my chest. But I stayed where I was because my mother was beside me, whispering along with every terrible word. When the service ended, everyone stood up. No one smiled or clapped. They filed out of the church in silence, the red cloaks brushing against the stone floor. Mom and I walked toward the door too. The priest stood by the exit, his hands folded neatly in front of him, still smiling. "It was so good to see you both," he said, staring at me with bright, sharp eyes. "And Chelsea, I'll be looking forward to seeing you again next week." I forced a small smile. I did not answer. I knew one thing for sure. I was not coming back. The moment we were outside, I ripped the cloak off and folded it over my arm. We got into the car. The engine started, and the rumble filled the silence between us. Neither of us spoke as we drove home. When we got home from church, Mom acted like nothing strange had happened. She took off her red cloak and hung it neatly in the hallway closet. I left mine crumpled on a chair and went straight to my room. I could not stop thinking about what I had seen. The cloaks. The chanting in a language I did not understand. The priest's face when I did not bow like everyone else. It was not normal. It was not the church I remembered. Later that afternoon, Mom made tea and called me back to the kitchen. I sat down across from her, feeling tired and angry. "I'm not going back," I said, before she could start talking about it again. Mom's hands tightened around her mug. "You should not be so quick to judge," she said. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the anger under it. "What was that today?" I asked. "Since when does everyone wear cloaks and chant in Latin?" Mom sipped her tea before answering. "The church has been upgrading, that," she said. "The cloaks help people feel like part of something. The readings are more modern. The priest chooses them to help us stay strong with how the world is changing." I stared at her. I could not believe what I was hearing. "That was not from the Bible," I said. "That was something else." Mom's face tightened. She put her mug down hard enough to make a sharp sound against the table. "Take those words back," she said, her voice shaking. I opened my mouth to argue, but something about her face made me stop. Her eyes were wild and scared. I shut my mouth and looked away. The rest of the day passed in silence. I stayed in my room as much as I could. At night, I heard Mom downstairs whispering prayers in Latin by the fireplace. The sound drifted up the stairs. It made my skin crawl. Every time I asked her about it, she smiled tightly and said, "If you're not ready to see the truth, then don't argue with me." After a few days, I stopped asking. It was easier that way, but the house did not feel like home anymore. It felt cold and strange. It felt like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the cracks under your feet. When Sunday came around again, Mom stood by the front door in her red cloak. She looked at me with hope in her eyes. "I'm just dropping you off," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'm not staying." As soon as the words left my mouth, something changed in her face. Her whole body stiffened. Her smile vanished. "You need to come," she said. Her voice was low and angry. "It's the rule." I stared at her. "What rule?" I asked. For a second, it looked like she might slap me or break down crying. Her eyes darted to the window like she was afraid someone might hear us. "If you live in this town," she whispered, "you have to attend the church." A cold feeling ran down my spine. "Since when?" I asked, raising my voice. "That's insane. You can't force people to go to church." Mom shook her head. Tears filled her eyes. She stepped closer and grabbed my wrist. "You'll join us soon, Chelsea," she said. Her voice was a broken whisper. "I know you will." I pulled my arm away. I did not say anything. I just drove her to the church, watching her out of the corner of my eye. She did not say goodbye when she got out. She just walked up the steps, the red cloak flapping around her legs, and disappeared into the church. I sat there for a moment, staring at the closed doors. Then I turned the car around and drove home. The silence inside the car was louder than anything I had ever heard. The next day, I stayed upstairs most of the morning. I tried to distract myself by cleaning my room and going through old books. Anything to stay away from the heavy feeling that filled the house. Downstairs, I could hear Mom. She knelt by the fireplace again, whispering those long Latin prayers that made my skin crawl. The sound was steady and slow, like a dripping faucet you could not fix. Then the doorbell rang. I froze where I was standing. I heard the front door creak open, and my mother's soft voice float up the stairs. "Chelsea, dear," she called. "Come down, please. We have a visitor." Something in her voice made my stomach twist. It sounded strained, like she was pretending everything was normal when it clearly was not. I walked slowly down the stairs. Standing just inside the doorway was the priest. He wore the same dark suit as before. He smiled too widely, and his eyes looked too sharp. When he saw me, his smile grew even bigger. "Ah, Chelsea," he said warmly. "I missed you at the service yesterday." He stepped aside and motioned for me to come into the living room. Mom disappeared into the kitchen, probably to make tea, like this was a normal visit. I sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. The priest sat across from me, folding his hands neatly in his lap. "You should really attend," he said in a smooth voice. "It's important, especially for someone like you." I gave him a tight smile. "It's not really my thing," I said, trying to sound polite. The priest leaned forward slightly. His eyes sharpened. "I remember you as a child," he said, almost wistful. "You were always so obedient, so smart, always followed the rules." I stiffened. "I'm grown now," I said. "I make my own choices. Church is not one of them." For a moment, the smile on his face cracked. Then he forced it back into place, wider and sharper than before. "Is this," he said slowly, "how you want your mother to remember you, for her last days?" My heart skipped a beat. "What?" I asked, my voice rising. He smiled sweetly, but it felt like poison. "I know she is sick, Chelsea," he said. "She might not have much time left. Shouldn't you want to make her happy?" Anger and confusion burned in my chest. "I can make her happy without going to church," I said, trying to stay calm. "You can't force me," the priest chuckled softly. The sound made my skin crawl. "Well," he said, tilting his head slightly, "we actually can." I clenched my hands into fists in my lap. "You see," he continued, "everyone who lives here must attend the church. It's not optional anymore." I shook my head. "That's not legal," I said. "You can't make people go." The priest leaned even closer. His eyes gleamed. "The mayor agreed. The rule is the rule. And you would not want to be the one to break it, would you?" Before I could answer, Mom came back into the room. She carried a tray with 2 mugs of tea. Her hands were shaking a little. The priest stood up smoothly. "Thank you," he said, smiling again. "But I'll be on my way. I will see you both next week." And just like that, he left. The front door closed behind him with a soft click. The living room felt colder, like he had taken all the warmth with him. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door. My hands were shaking, and I did not know if it was from fear or rage. Because deep down, I knew something now. The priest had not been asking, he had been warning. The days after the priest's visit felt strange. At first, it was little things. A glass would slide off the kitchen counter and shatter on the floor when no one was near it. The lights flickered on and off, even though we had never had problems with the wiring before. The old TV in the living room turned on by itself in the middle of the night, blasting loud static that filled the whole house. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe the house was just old. Maybe we were both just stressed. But Mom did not think it was normal. Every time something happened, she would turn to me with a scared look in her eyes. "This is happening because of you," she whispered once. "Because you will not go to the church." I rolled my eyes and tried to ignore her. I buried myself in anything I could. Cleaning, reading, even organizing closets. I did not want to sit still and listen to her prayers or her warnings. But no matter what I did, the house felt different. It felt cold and heavy, like the walls were pressing in on me. Sometimes I thought I could hear faint whispers coming from the empty rooms, but whenever I listened closely, everything went silent again. When Sunday came again, Mom was already standing by the door in her red cloak. She clutched her purse tightly with both hands. Her face was pale, and her eyes were full of tears. I grabbed my car keys without even sitting down. "I'm not going," I said firmly. Her face crumpled. She followed me out to the car, crying openly now. She grabbed my arm. "Please, Chelsea," she sobbed. "Please, just come with me. It's only gonna get worse if you don't. Please." I pulled her hand off me gently. My throat felt tight, but I forced the words out. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said. "But I can't. I won't." She stood in the driveway, her red cloak moving in the wind as I pulled away. Even as I drove down the street, I could still hear her voice echoing in my head. "It's only going to get worse." Mom came home later that evening. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows over the yard. I heard the front door creak open. I heard her soft footsteps in the hallway. When she stepped into the kitchen, I gasped. She was clutching her hand in a dirty kitchen towel. The fabric was soaked through with blood. "Mom," I shouted, rushing toward her. "What happened?" I thought maybe she had fallen or hurt herself in the garden. Something normal, something that made sense. But she only looked at me with blank, empty eyes. "I had to do it," she said softly, "because you won't come." I grabbed her shoulders, my heart racing. "Did he do this to you?" I demanded. "Did the priest hurt you?" She shook her head slowly. "It's the only way," she whispered. Something inside me snapped. I could not take it anymore. I grabbed my keys again and stormed out of the house. Mom called after me, but I did not stop. I did not even look back. The drive to the church was a blur. The trees whipped past the windows. The engine roared louder than my own thoughts. I pulled into the church parking lot too fast and slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the gravel before stopping. The church loomed ahead of me, dark and crooked against the night sky. I got out of the car and walked quickly toward the heavy wooden doors. I threw them open without knocking. The sound echoed loudly through the empty church. Inside, the candles were still burning. Their light flickered against the stone walls, but the pews were empty. There was no one there. No choir, no congregation, no priest, only silence. A heavy, waiting silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I stepped inside carefully. My boots clicked against the stone floor with each step. I walked down the center aisle toward the altar. The air smelled strange. There was the usual smell of melted wax, but underneath it was something sour and rotten. I reached the altar and stood there, my hands trembling. Then the doors behind me slammed shut with a loud bang. I spun around, my heart jumping into my throat. From the shadows near the entrance, I heard a voice. It was low and rough, like someone dragging rocks across the ground. "You finally came," the voice said. I turned around slowly. The priest was standing near the entrance, but he did not look human anymore. His body was hunched and twisted. His arms hung too long at his sides, and his fingers curled like claws. His eyes glowed bright red in the darkness. In his hand he held a knife. The blade was wet and dark under the flickering candlelight. He started walking toward me. Each step he took looked wrong, like his bones were moving the wrong way under his skin. "How can a daughter make her mother pay for breaking the rules?" he said. His voice was thick and wet, like he was speaking through a mouth full of mud. I stumbled back, looking around for something to protect myself with. There was nothing. "You're sick," I said, my voice shaking. "You're all sick." The priest moved faster. He was between me and the doors. The only way left was deeper into the church, toward the altar. He dragged the knife along the pews as he passed, leaving deep scratches in the wood. "Everyone who lives here attends the church," he said. "There's a reason. You come, you sit, you listen, and we leave you alone." I stopped backing up. His words sank into my mind like ice. "We?" I asked. The priest smiled wider, showing teeth that were too sharp and too many. From the corners of the room I heard whispers, soft, slithering voices that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The priest's voice grew louder. "I'm glad you came to pay for your mistakes yourself," he said. "I didn't come for that." I shouted, "I came because of what you did to my mom. She's sick and you're abusing her." The priest laughed. The sound echoed through the empty church, cold and hollow. "No one is abusing anyone," he said. "You come, you listen, you leave unharmed." His face twisted and changed. He was not human anymore. "But you didn't come," he said. His last word exploded out of him like a roar. He sprinted at me, faster than anything should have been able to move. I turned and ran. I weaved between the rows of pews, my heart slamming against my ribs. Behind me I could hear the heavy crashes as he knocked the pews aside like toys. He was faster than me. He was gaining. I felt a burning sting across my arm. I stumbled and looked down. Blood soaked into my sleeve where the knife had grazed me. The candles around the church flared up at once. Their flames turned deep red. The whole church looked like it was burning from the inside. "You have to pay for your sins," the priest shouted. His voice rattled the walls. I kept running, but my foot caught on a broken chair and I fell hard onto the stone floor. The impact knocked the breath out of me. Before I could get up, he was there. He stood over me, his eyes burning. He raised the knife high above his head. He started chanting again in that deep, guttural Latin. Even though I did not understand the words, I could feel them digging into me. I struggled and kicked, but he was too strong. The knife hovered above my chest. Then behind him, one of the candle towers fell over. The flames caught on the old dry wood of the pews. The fire grew fast, climbing up the walls. The priest turned his head for a second to look at the fire. It was enough. I punched him in the throat with all the strength I had left. He staggered back, coughing. The knife slipped from his hand. I grabbed it before he could. Without thinking, I plunged it into his chest. The priest let out a scream that was not human. The sound made the whole building shake. Fire raced up his body. The flames swallowed him, turning him into a burning figure. I ran for the doors, my lungs burning. Behind me, I could hear him still moving, still burning, still chasing me. I grabbed the heavy wooden doors. They were stuck. I pulled with everything I had. The priest lunged at me through the smoke. He grabbed the knife out of his chest with one burning hand and stabbed it into my side. Pain exploded through my body. I screamed, but I kept pulling on the door. Finally, the doors gave way. I stumbled outside just as the roof of the church caved in behind me. I hit the ground hard. I crawled away from the burning building, gasping for air. Hands grabbed me and dragged me farther away from the fire. I heard people shouting. I heard sirens in the distance. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed. Machines beeped around me. My body hurt everywhere. I blinked at the bright lights and tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest. Mom was there. She was sitting next to me, holding my hand. Tears ran down her face as she hugged me gently. "You're okay," she whispered. "Thank God, you're okay." I groaned. My ribs hurt when I moved. "What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse. I remembered the fire. I remembered the priest. I remembered the knife. "The church," I said. "What about the church?" Mom pulled back and looked at me with confusion. "What church, sweetheart?" she said softly. I stared at her. "The church," I said again. "You made me go. You wore the cloak. You prayed." Mom shook her head. "We don't even have a church in this town," she said. I kept staring at her. I felt like I could not breathe. "I never believed in God," she said gently. "You know that." A nurse came into the room and called her away. She squeezed my hand and left. I lay there alone, heart racing. Something told me to check. I pulled back the hospital gown. I ignored the IV pulling at my arm. My side was wrapped in thick bandages. I peeled them away with shaking hands. There, carved into my skin, were strange symbols. They glowed faintly red under the hospital lights. The lines twisted and moved if I looked too long. I stared at them, horror rising in my throat. Then I heard a voice, not out loud, inside my head, soft and cold. "You are going to rebuild the church.